Whenever you look at a massive, beautifully constructed skyscraper, you have to wonder how it all started, right? It obviously didn't just appear out of thin air. It began with a single microscopic brick. And today, I really want you to think about language as a construction project. Because every single email, every text, every brilliant novel you've ever read, it all starts with an absolute microscopic unit of meaning. Understanding that tiny unit, well, that's the secret to engineering some seriously powerful communication. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tackling something absolutely crucial, building sentences from the ground up. We're going to master English syntax using a bottom-up method, moving all the way from tiny morphemes to complete, bulletproof sentences. Because, let's face it, in the professional world, a poorly constructed sentence can cost you a client, a job, or honestly, just your credibility. So if grammar usually feels like this chaotic pile of rules to you, don't sweat it. We're going to organize it together using a simple, foolproof construction analogy that's going to totally change the way you write. So here's our blueprint for today's build. We'll start with the blueprint of language, then move on to morphemes to clauses explained. Next, we'll dive into the anatomy of complete sentences, check out some common sentence building errors, and finally, we'll cover fixing run-ons and splices. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the blueprint of language. Okay, let's dive into this. Think of language construction as 5 distinct steps in a hierarchy. We start at step 1 with a morpheme. You can think of this as a single Lego stud, literally the absolute tiniest piece of raw material that actually carries any meaning. Now those morphemes, they build words, which are like your individual solid bricks. Then, words group together to form phrases, which are basically partially built walls. Next, phrases assemble into clauses. Think of those as fully enclosed rooms. And finally, those rooms come together to form a complete, self-standing sentence. That's your finished house, ready to be lived in. Moving right along to section 2, morphemes to clauses explained, let's really dissect these raw materials. The absolute most crucial thing to grasp here is the morpheme. By definition, it's the smallest, meaningful unit of language that cannot be broken down further. The study of these tiny linguistic atoms is called morphology, and they truly are the fundamental building blocks. Because if you try to break a morpheme apart, it loses all its meaning and just becomes a jumble of random letters. When you finally master morphemes, you literally stop guessing at vocabulary and start engineering your word choices with complete precision. To put that into perspective, take the morpheme un, which means not, and the morpheme happy. Snap those two separate, meaningful Lego bricks together, and boom, you've built a brand new complete word, unhappy. I know it sounds incredibly simple, but this is the exact foundation of all advanced vocabulary. Now, as we climb up the ladder, words assemble into phrases. Take a phrase like in the room or a beautiful girl. It's a group of words that belong together, but, and here's the kicker, they don't give a complete meaning on their own. It's just a wall. And well, you can't live in a wall. To get a functional room, you need a clause. A clause upgrades a phrase because it brings in a specific power combo, a subject and a verb. Something like, the boy is sleeping. See? Now we have a space that actually makes sense. So now that we've got our walls in our rooms built, let's head into section 3, anatomy of complete sentences. To build a finished complete sentence, you're essentially pulling from a specific inventory of materials. First up, your subject. That's the person or thing doing the action, the primary actor on your construction site. Then there's the verb, which is the action itself or a state of being. The object is whatever is receiving that action. And then we have the decorators. Complements give us essential extra information to complete the meaning of the subject or object. And adjuncts provide the extra context, like the time, place, or manner of the action. Let's see how these pieces actually scale up to build something impressive. You could have a really simple, sturdy structure like, the man studied. One subject, one verb. Totally fine. But compare that to this. The kind man at the library studied hard for the test. See what we did there? We added elaborate decorations. We've got adjectives describing the man and adjunct phrases telling us exactly where and why he's studying. But notice this, the core load-bearing structure, the subject man and the verb studied, remains exactly the same. Now in English, there is a very strict building code you've got to follow, and it's called the SVO order. Subject plus verb plus object. For example, he obtained degree. He is our subject acting, obtained is our action verb, and degree is the object receiving that action. If you mess with this fundamental order, well, your building starts to lean, your reader gets totally confused, and your entire message can just collapse. Which brings us perfectly to our 4th section,
Common sentence building errors. Let's shift gears here for a second.
We need to talk about building code violations. These are the structural failures that ruin good writing and derail professional emails. The first major violation is the sentence fragment. Basically, this is an incomplete sentence, missing a subject, a verb, or a complete idea. Think of a sentence fragment like a house that's completely missing its roof. From a distance, sure, it might look like a house, but the second it starts raining, you realize it simply cannot stand on its own as a shelter. It's failing to do its one job.
Let's look at this in practice. Because he was tired, that is a classic fragment. It just leaves us completely hanging. Why? What exactly happened because he was tired? The structural support is just missing. But by adding an independent clause like he slept, we take that confusing, unstable fragment and turn it into a sturdy, complete thought. He slept because he was tired.
Okay, our next violation is the dreaded run-on sentence. This happens when two complete sentences are written without proper punctuation or joining words. Now, a really big misconception is that run-ons are just sentences that are too long. No way. A run-on is a critical structural failure. It's when two independent rooms are just smashed together without a load-bearing wall built between them. Try reading this sentence quickly without stopping. I went home, I slept. It is incredibly jarring, right? Your brain is desperately expecting a barrier between those two separate ideas. The easiest fix for a run-on? Just build a solid load-bearing wall between the two independent clauses. And that wall is a full stop. I went home, I slept. Clean, simple, and structurally sound.
Now for a very specific and honestly an extremely common rule violation, the comma splice. This happens when two independent clauses are joined only with a comma. I want you to think of a comma as a weak piece of Scotch tape. It is fantastic for hanging up light little decorations, but it is nowhere near strong enough to do the heavy lifting of joining two full, heavy sentences together. Listen to how this fails structurally. I love classical music. It makes me feel joyful. Both halves of this sentence are complete rooms. That poor little comma just collapses under their weight. But by upgrading that weak tape to a sturdy semicolon, we provide the structural integrity the sentence desperately needs to support both of those independent thoughts. So how do we make absolutely sure our writing is always structurally sound? Let's move to our final section, fixing run-ons and splices. I'm going to give you the ultimate toolkit for repairing these structural issues in your everyday writing. Here are the 4 correct tools. Number 1, the full stop. Just separate the ideas into 2 distinct houses. Honestly, it never fails. Number 2, a comma plus a coordinating conjunction like and, but, or so. Remember, the comma can't work alone, but pair it with a conjunction and you formed a highly stable bridge. Number 3, the semicolon. Use this to join 2 distinct but very closely related sentences. And number 4, a subordinating conjunction like because or while. This tool intentionally turns one independent clause into a dependent structure. That means it now leans safely and correctly on the other clause for support. Here is your ultimate structural checklist, wrapping up all the core ideas of morphology, syntax, and punctuation that we've engineered today. Just remember, a simple sentence is one independent clause. A run-on completely lacks a joint. A comma splice uses a dangerously weak joint. And correct joining requires the right hardware, a full stop, a proper conjunction, or a semicolon. I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge today. Open up your sent folder and take a look at the last professional email you wrote. Apply this exact blueprint to it. Did you intentionally construct well-organized morphemes into phrases, clauses, and solid, structurally sound sentences? Or did you just dump a pile of word bricks onto the page and kind of hope the reader could build the meaning themselves? Master this bottom-up construction, and your writing will be absolutely unshakable. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy building!